Well, hi everybody, it's the Week in the Tackle podcast, the podcast where we get together on a weekly basis and tackle things in the world of football we thought were interesting. I'm Tom Rennie, alongside me is a man you know from your TV screens covering Major League Soccer and the US men's national team, but today you know him as someone who's slowly morphing into me because he's wearing my old glasses. We're going to shave his head to make him look like a football next. It is Mr. Brian Dunny Dunseth. Hey buddy, all right, you look great.
Two things. Number one, I don't know what's happened. Like once you hit 45, everything goes downhill. You end up doing blood tests and tests on your body for longevity and life and just trying to figure out if you're heading in the right direction or you're swallowing fish pills the size of people's thumbs nowadays.
Sister.
And then I realized I'm a 1.5 type of guy. So in the midst of buying off Amazon Prime, I think for $9, I got 4 glasses. Somehow I ended up with these on during
I like
this.
them. They're nice.
Yeah, they're cool. They came
You've got the Liberace suit, and now you've got Elton John's glasses, so that's good.
Absolutely. And then on top of that, I'm going bald anyway. So, yeah. Yes. Hey, how are you? Good to see you.
You look a bit like Dave Medner. I'm super into it. Do you know Dave Medner? You know, Dave Medner Everidge. Possum. It's lovely. I'm doing all right. I've got a question for you on that before we get to our show today. So it was my birthday recently, as you know.
Happy birthday once again.
And I celebrated by having a heart attack. I wouldn't recommend it. But I got a present yesterday from my sister and brother-in-law. And it's an England shirt to wear this summer, hopefully in Miami.
It's Declan.
No, but they've had 40 put on the front. And, you know, I'm not really telling people that. I guess I'm telling national radio and our podcast I'm turning 40. But it also has got 40 Rennie on the back. Now, I love the shirt, and it's a lovely gesture. But am I, as a 40-year-old man, allowed to... Where can I wear this?
Nowhere.
Am I allowed to wear this anywhere?
You're asking the wrong person.
No,
you're asking the wrong person.
You can pull off anything. You're a stylish man.
No, well, here's my problem.
Yeah,
and I found this kind of falls in line with a lot of other guys that have played. I don't like wearing jerseys. I very, very, very rarely wear jerseys, and when I do, I can't I don't want my name on it. Like I want it just as like if it was like a Kevin De Bruyne jersey or it's like a Cantona jersey, something like that.
Maguire, you could wear that.
Congratulations, Harry. Talk about a turnaround. Harry. Talk about a mentality monster for what he's dealt with. Does he still have to go to jail in Greece or no? Is that
no? He can go back to Mykonos now to celebrate. I wouldn't recommend the Uzo if you were Harry Maguire.
So yeah, I personally don't wear jerseys too often. It's very, very, very rare that I wear them. But
you've done it for a living though, didn't you? So why would you? You know.
Yeah. So
it's like going to work for you. You wear a suit to relax.
But it's super weird too because I get all of these. I got that joke. I get all of these jerseys. Like I just got the brand new the Stars US jersey, the dark blue one.
Nice. The tablecloth.
It's got my name on it. So I'm not.
You got the black one you showed us last week. It's cool. The black one's cool.
Navy blue, black somewhere in there. Yeah. And so it says Dunseth 26 on it. And I like Mike and my middle boy, he'll rock all the jerseys with his name on it. And I'm like, it's so weird. Stop wearing the ones with our names on it. And he's like, why? It's rad. And I was like, yeah, it can be rad, but you're going to get bullied. Like you're going to get made fun of. So why take a heater why take strays for no reason? So
it's rad. That's why. Because it's rad.
One of the best movies ever made. I think it just hit 40 years, by the way.
So rad.
Who would have ever known Bart Connor was such a good BMXer? You know,
no one ever would. But I cannot do a conversation.
It was Lori Loughlin.
King BMX movie.
Yeah, Lori Loughlin.
Tim.
Break it.
First one. I'm glad Tim's back so we can swear again this week. I was doing the editing last week and it was too much effort, so I asked him not to do it, and then we did.
Can I give the listeners some insight, the viewers insight about last week?
Yeah.
You two were flirting with each other for a good 40 minutes. And when I say flirting with one another, you guys were going back and forth trying to figure out a login code for
it was
40
difficult.
minutes.
It was difficult.
It was amazing.
Because Tim was on holiday, end? And I couldn't work out how to upload the program that I'd edited. And I had to get Tim off his holiday to help me like an invalid. So there you go.
It was amazing.
Anyway, today's program, that's it. A few topics today, and I bet your wife was very happy, Tim. Family show.
Wait, you're married?
And then you had to edit the podcast. Anyway, I want to talk a bit about Arsenal. By the time people hear this, they might have played the first leg against Sporting Club de Portugal or Sporting Lisbon for the non-pretentious. But I think the conversation about their last two games will still be live, so we'll do a bit of that. I wanted to ask you about the Inter Miami Stadium, which opened this week, and get your kind of wider view on that. And I'd love your view as well on fans going early following this weekend. I thought that'd be quite interesting. Let's start with Arsenal.
Yeah.
Because they lost the Carabao Cup final when we did a fairly long show, which people can go back and listen to. Still relevant, I think, today, about them not having a kind of another gear to switch to when things go against them, and they kind of double down on the old ways, which have got them, clear at the top of the Premier League table. Lost that Man City game. Against Southampton this weekend in the FA Cup, they play a semi-strong, semi-second string team. There's a couple of first-teamers in there, but in general, lots of rotation. They had some, quote-unquote, I'll do some inverted comma, injuries during the international break. I'm sure some were genuine. I'm also sure that some weren't so genuine. I kind of make them right pulling out of a friendly against Uruguay if you're Declan Rice, considering those games were pointless, and he's definitely going to start in the World Cup. Well,
those
you know
tackles,
what?
by the way.
Give us, just horrendous
Araujo
ones.
and...
Makes sense why maybe you wouldn't
Valverde.
play in a game like that. Oh, we're going to play Uruguay. Oh, good. That will definitely come through fit after that. But then they have this Southampton game. They're awful in that game. They're deservedly beaten in that game. And now we've got to a point where they're still favourites to win the league, but the game in hand and the Man City game coming up, if that goes in Man City's favour, who you're backing in the final five, it's probably not Arsenal. We don't know about the first leg against Sporting as yet, but I'd be stunned if they were Champions League winners. Again, we'll find out together. Give us your view on whether this is some standard stumbles that, unfortunately for the narrative of it, have come back-to-back for Arsenal, or is this the start of a familiar crumble and the symptoms of a mindset that Arteta has given this club, which is safety first, caution first, which has cost them year in, year out during his time in charge? Is it a big thing or a little thing? What say you?
Yeah. Can I deviate really quickly and just say Southampton's Twitter social media person? You're amazing. You're just fantastic. Like the banter and the shots across the bow and just Molotov cocktailing everything that was the post 90 minutes was phenomenal. So cheers and kudos to you. So I was traveling this weekend. I was up in Vancouver with Max, and we had a great game, Vancouver Whitecaps against the Portland Timbers. And I woke up at 5 a.m. to watch the game out there. And as I'm watching, I'm thinking about games, I'm thinking about performances, I'm thinking about the weekend, I'm thinking about coming off the international break, and trying to really come back to the idea of how do you manufacture momentum. Well, you got to start with the talent that's available, right? You've got to talk about the manager and his coaching staff setting up a set of standards, and then the tactics. And then you got to think about the execution. And within all of this, it's probably a very similar conversation right now, obviously different with Arne Slot and Liverpool. But when I'm watching Mikel Arteta's side, it's obviously the margins, which has separated them in Premier League action all season long. And those margins are going to be in the offensive phase of play. How can you either create or generate corner kicks, last minute defending, block shots, all of that from the opponent, or have them committing fouls that create set piece opportunities. And the margins in the run of play, you're watching a very clear identity when it comes to Arsenal.
Yeah.
And now, obviously, we've listened to everybody. We've listened to all the heavyweights and all the former players that have either won Premier League titles or have come close to winning Premier League titles or just been perennial Premier League title winners. And everybody keeps coming back to really the same version of the conversation, which is until you've done it, you don't know how to do it. And I think that's what we continue to kind of see are these moments in which obviously the challenges with, the battle against Pep Guardiola and Mikel Arteta and Arsenal and Man City, it's a coin toss half the time. But we also talk about momentum. And right now, I think it would be very easy for me to say that Man City has all the momentum behind them to catch Arsenal, because Arsenal continues to figure out certain ways to, when we're so used to them turning draws into wins in these very last moment, these last 10 minutes of matches, now they're having kind of these unique stumbles where I think this year we've only seen them do it twice, and it's whether it's a 2-game or a 3-game stumble where they've only taken 2 out of 9 points. all of a sudden there becomes this weird psychology. And again, unless we're watching another Amazon All or Nothing Arsenal edition where we're truly capturing every single phase of what this season looks like behind the scenes, all we get are these pictures where the players have their balls, the ball, all their heads to the ball, and they're all like holding each other. And it's like he's trying to create the camaraderie. And I understand this is all psychological manipulation to make everyone feel good. But here's the thing. I'm still unsold on the consistency of Man City because Man City's been so inconsistent this season. So it's almost like the only thing that matters is now double failure in cup competitions, the potential for the failure in Champions League, although they have the best path to the final that you could possibly have in this draw, considering the weaker of the bracket that they found themselves in. And then a consistency of performance that head-to-head, the proverbial 6-point swing with the game in hand, away at the Etihad against Man City, and then followed up at home against Newcastle. Those feel like those are the ones that are going to change the directive and the narrative of this final, or excuse me, heading to these last couple of days. And I'm not sure where else they slip up. As Bournemouth could be a tricky one in between these two games, then followed by at City, then Newcastle at home, but then you're Fulham and away at West Ham. So it's almost like if you can just navigate with the pressure through these next 5 games, then we're talking about, Premier League title winners for the first time in a really long time. And Mikel Arteta checks that box. And I think when we look back, it's kind of like what happened with Arne Slot and Liverpool last year. Yeah, we should be disappointed of an FA Cup and losing out to PSG in Champions League, but they win a Premier League trophy. That's something to be, super excited about.
But how much is it damaging to have lost these 2 games
Hugely.
in terms of the mentality of the club? Because we have so many conversations about how you get over the line, how tough it is to get over the line. I mean, Jurgen Klopp, as brilliant as he was at Liverpool, only got over the line against Pep Guardiola one time in what we think of as the Klopp-Guardiola era, when City fans are always like, oh, the Klopp era had 1 trophy and we got 6 of them. But that was the standards they had to get to just to win 1. But winning something changes everything. It changes the conversation, it changes the content, it changes the narrative, it changes the culture. And look, they didn't turn up in the Carabao Cup final for reasons we discussed at length previously, which is what makes it even more surprising to me, the way they said about this Southampton game. They're playing well, Southampton, right now, under a manager who's got a name like a 1980s Victoria's Secret catalogue model, Ton de Eckert. I'm sure would be a tremendous friend to El McPherson in 1989, but you'd still think this Arsenal team should beat a decent-looking championship outfit. But to change as much as they did, I know Sporting's coming up, I know Bournemouth is coming up, I know everything else is more important, blah, blah, blah. But it just feels like the culture of Arsenal needs to change from a club that sells product. They're amazing at selling tracksuit tops and amazing at selling clothing and amazing at making money. They've got to change from the most sellable club to the winningest club, to use an Americanism that I hate. And Arteta seems to have bought into that in the league in terms of win at any cost. Yeah. Win, doesn't matter what it looks like. And we've discussed that ad nauseum, right? He's gone for that. But then in the FA Cup, he played a team that was like, well, we win, we win, we lose, we lose. That doesn't seem like the culture of a club that have a Labrador at the training ground called win. The idea is to win, but he set his team up to fail. And that just seems an odd thing to me. Play your strongest team, get that game 1 against Southampton, bring the players off. That feels better for the culture that Arteta seemingly is trying to create.
Yeah, and obviously I think what you're referring to is Kepa Arrizabalaga getting the start in the final. And that's what it really comes down to, because you look at Trafford on the opposite side, a couple of, moments where I think in particular it's 2 to 3 multi-save, multi-incident moments where he's fantastic, whereas Kepa, a little bit of a ball spilt, a little bit of a misjudged ball in the air, and then all of a sudden you're saying you're celebrating one of the best backups in the modern game right now, who would have been the effective starter for Man City this year and probably done a hell of a job had it not been for Gigi Donnarumma being available late, from Luis Enrique in PSG. And I, when we're talking about that, the final loss, the loss in the finals, I understood why both managers went in that direction. And I almost wonder if Pep Guardiola, I wonder how much of a reaction it was for Mikel Arteta to, and this gets into the margins. I wish we could be the little birdies in the room listen to Mikel Arteta and his coaching staff when he found out that Pep had announced that he was going to go with his cup final team. And I wonder, and this is probably more malicious than real. I wonder if Mikel, it was this really intelligent, manipulative moment where Pep was like, "All right, well, I'm comfortable enough going into a final with some of my reserves, the guys that wouldn't be in the starting because they've earned this opportunity to make it to the final and lift this trophy. And psychologically, it would be huge for the momentum. And in the transition moment of getting away from the Kevin De Bruyne years, and I mean that with all due respect, you're teaching that next generation, Reinders, Cherky, Alt-Nori, all those guys, Mateus Nunes, how to lift trophies, right? Whereas, to your point, Arteta, you just got to get it over the line. But also, I guess there's a part of me that looks at and always having this, for the most part, like an affinity for the backups because the backups, dude, they're such good dudes. Like once you have a good backup, those are the guys that you root for when they get their opportunity. And for me, I think there's like internally this, well, Kepa's gone through so much throughout the course of his career. Sorry, Tim. Like why not give him the chance to be, celebratory in a moment where it's, on a couple of occasions he's fallen short. Like keep the guys tuned in because you're going to need those guys. And I wonder how much, and again, unless we're there, we don't really know, but I wonder how much that comes into play of, dude, you never know what's going to happen. Yeah, David Raya is incredible, but like if he goes down, look what's happening at Liverpool with Ali Sun. Do we need a guy to have momentum, especially because again, my theory is once you get to this stage of the season, it's not necessarily the guys you've relied on the entire year that are going to be your heroes. It's the guys that you haven't relied on that all of a sudden become the most important players because those are the guys where you're going to need 10 out of 10 performances with only a few matches left. Yeah. And what's their mindset? What's their psyche? What physically, how are they playing? But I take your point. Yeah. I think it's well deserved.
Well, look, we'll find out together if Arteta has got things right over the next few weeks, whether they are Premier League champions, whether they make it through in the Champions League and Sporting as well. I did want to ask you a little bit about Liverpool too. You mentioned it there in one of your answers about the weekend and just how bad it was for them. Oof. But it's really the bit from both Arne Slot and Virgil van Dijk, which I thought was interesting and I wanted to get your view on, in that Van Dijk said they gave up against Man City in the second half. Slot had a comment to the effect of, we didn't see the fighting spirit we usually have, or something like that in his post-match, talking about the second half. It's FA Cup, and so you get a bigger amount of fans that can go to away games in the FA Cup. You get like 10% of the stadium or something like that. And of the kind of 7,000 that went for Liverpool, about 5,000, I would say, were gone with 20 minutes to go, which is, I don't think that common for Liverpool. Look, they're in more games than other teams are, and so that's why the fans stay longer more often than not. But still, notable, they were all sort of going home. There'd been some booing at Anfield of Slot himself as well, which is, not something we've seen really since Roy Hodgson was in charge there, to my memory. What do you make to them saying we gave up, specifically from Van Dijk and Slot as well? That was, I don't know, what do you think of that?
When I hear that, I try to put myself in the locker room of experiences that I've had, and it tells me that something behind the scenes is happening that's so significant that the players culturally are like when you question someone's mentality, I think that's honestly the worst thing that you could possibly do to someone other than spitting on them and telling them genuinely "F you." Sorry, Tim, because that implies from a personal like from a personal and professional level, something that's so outrageous. I mean, you're talking about Liverpool Football Club. You're talking about, Premier League title winners, teams that a group of players that are looked at legitimately for competing for the Premier League title, especially after that net spend, calculated summer spend, however you want to dice it. The reality is that heading into this year, we all thought with the 300 plus million spent that this was finally Liverpool's ownership group effectively going all in and understanding that the second season is going to be different for Arne Slot. He's going to continue to add, but we thought that there was a legitimate directive and plan to strengthen the style of player that he wanted to play. But maybe we miscalculated when we're talking about Virgil van Dijk and Mo Salah and what that leadership effect, that personality, that, the icon. and icons thrown around quite a bit, but I think they are iconic for their performances. But those two players, it's almost like until they leave the room, you're going to have players kind of bending the knee and being like, I can't, I haven't earned what they earned, so I can't really say what I want to say. You know, when I look at that team, there's no reason whatsoever. I don't care what formation you're playing. I don't care who you're coming up with. There would never be a moment in which I could have possibly understood that Liverpool was going to lose 10 league matches this season.
Yeah.
No chance. No, but as I say that, the signs, I can remember one of the first clips that we put up this year, this Premier League campaign, had to do with Arne Slot and Liverpool, and me saying they're not playing well. It's going to take some time to bed in with this group of players, but they're turning losses into draws out of wins. And I said something to the effect of that shows how strong this mentality is. Well, little by little, the quality that they've put together for some crazy odd reason, you think it's a divine right when Liverpool's on the field outside of Arsenal and Manchester City that they're going to take the full 3 points. So the psychology of this group somewhere is broken, and there's probably internally some type of probably an understanding now that Mo has decided to walk away for obvious reasons. I mean, for him to get to this point, it makes it very clear that behind the scenes something more malicious has been going on. But it's almost like I wonder if behind the scenes there's like this idea of what the next version of Liverpool will look like without Virgil van Dijk, without Mo Salah, without their influence, without their stature, without their presence. And it's almost like, is that what they need to move on from the Jurgen Klopp era? And I just wonder how big of a conversation that possibly could be behind the scenes, because this group of players, man, they're too good to find themselves in this situation.
And it sort of says to me as well, and I think a lot of that is right, in that, Father Time remains undefeated with some of these players, in that, going back to last summer now, and look, obviously the Jota thing happened, and you can't quite legislate for that.
It's an outlier.
But absolutely, but also look at the squad build, and it's obviously an unbelievable tragedy what happened to Diogo Jota. But if you look at it from a squad build perspective, some players go out, some players come in. You knew you didn't have Jota, you knew you didn't have Darwin Núñez, you knew you didn't have one or two others. Alexander-Arnold had gone. I don't know. Maybe it's just a case of Milos Kerkez and Frimpong, and to a lesser extent Bradley was already there, have not stepped up. And of course, there's that Leone injury as well. But looking at the way the squad has been built, and looking at the way that Arne Slot seems to want to play in the 4-2-2-2, Ralf Rangnick, Ralf Hasenhüttl German football formation that he wants to do, which doesn't seem to be working, and he's playing every player out of position, which is all very strange. And he obviously can't rely on Salah this time around as well. I just wonder, going back to that summer, whether in hindsight they spent too much money in the wrong positions, on the wrong players. They obviously, again, in hindsight, shouldn't have kept Salah. One wonders whether there was a need for more assessment of the fitness of Virgil van Dijk. I think that Konate, I've never been a fan of Konate, but you could see their brilliance last season, certainly for the first 7 months. He'd certainly faded as the season went on, whether there was a need to bring in a more senior centre-half. I mean, just going to this weekend, Joe Gomez playing at fullback this weekend, considering Dominic Szoboszlai has played there a bit this season and all of that. You look at it and you think, you could see this coming a long, long way off, and they didn't find the fix for it then. They didn't find the fix for it in January. Maybe they couldn't because they'd spent so much, in the same way that Guardiola can just toss off £120 million on two of the best players in the division to fix his problems. Liverpool, couldn't do that because of how much they'd spent. But it shows you, Dunny, how important squad build is, how important luck is and form is, but also that long-term planning. You could see the need for defensive midfield and central defence and fullback and Milov, and they got it all wrong, spending all their money on first Ekitike and then Wirtz and then Isak, who they should not have signed if they'd already signed Ekitike, whether he could have stayed fit or not. We're seeing chickens coming home to roost here from that massive spend.
And Leone, I don't think was ever going to be scheduled to start over Konate or Van Dijk, but a huge option. And by the way, again, without understanding the dynamics behind the scenes, Mark Gahey is such a massive, massive loss, especially when you see the level of quality when you slide him into that Manchester City side. All of a sudden, he's a leader amongst men. And when they're fully fit and healthy, imagine guys like Ruben Dias, alongside Gahey. That could have been And probably should have been, would have been the way I look at it. Okay, so Trent Alexander's out the door. You can never really plan for Connor Bradley going down. Frimpong was always this hybrid of a not really a right back. I mean, if people are concerned about, positioning from Trent Alexander-Arnold, you're going to have the same positional concern about Frimpong because he operated wide in a three, hybrid five system at Bayer Leverkusen. And the level and the jump was always going to be a next step for him. Obviously, the Dutch combination between Arne Slot and Frimpong allows for probably a different connectivity than we're seeing from Kirkez. That not that he can't connect to a player, but then when I watch Andrew Robertson, it's just a different version of Kirkez, and he might not have the same legs, and he might not have the same kind of certain capabilities at this stage of his career, but. Kirkez is undisputed, right, for this starting spot with the way this setup is. So much so that we thought Andy Robertson, for a quick hot second, was going to end up at Tottenham Hotspur for the second phase of the season. When I look in the midfield, I like McAllister, Gravenberch, and this is where I get confused. And you brought up Szoboszlai, and rightly so. Szoboszlai is a jack of all trades. Szoboszlai, as a modern player, is one of the best that we're seeing in kind of world football for his. I would say for Szoboszlai, he's putting to a 7 to 8 performance every single week, like a 7 to 8 performance, and you can put him at right. And again, he's going to make mistakes. He's going to, be late on offside trap, and he's going to not be stepping at the right time. It's just instinctually playing in that position is so much different. But he's such an intelligent player. He's so smart with the way he sees the game, and technically, he's outstanding. I think the biggest loss for Liverpool was Luis Diaz. And again, all due respect to Jota and the influential moments and how him as a human being, I don't think we can truly ever calculate correctly the loss of what it was as the human being inside that locker room, the man amongst the men, and then what he could do as a player. So that's something that we can never truly understand, right? It's just a tragedy and it's horrific. But Luis Diaz, I look at a team that's in the midst of, to your point, 4-2-2-2, trying to figure out who they are. And I had this conversation not too long ago. It had nothing to do with Liverpool. It had to do with another team. And the manager said, we don't have wingers. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't have wingers? He goes, our wingers aren't wingers. Our wingers are kind of tucked in wingers. Yeah. So it necessitates a move to a different type of system. And I look at this group, and how do you properly define Szoboszlai and Florian Wirtz outside of creative attacking midfielders? Because they're not wingers, they're pocket players, right? They're little hybrid 10s that kind of uniquely find that difference. They're kind of like 8-10s where they want a little bit more freedom, not necessarily they're trying to avoid to get whacked from behind, but they operate in the margins off the shoulders of defenders, in front of defenders, and off the shoulders of defensive midfielders. So then you're thinking Ekitike is going to flare. That's not Luis Diaz, who had his heels on the sideline every single time. That's not Mo Salah that has his heels on the sideline every single time. So I think they're caught in this conundrum of who they were versus who they want to be. And who they want to be, I'm not sure how much that includes the dynamic duo of Virgil van Dijk and Mo Salah, notwithstanding how incredible they've been over these last 5-6 seasons.
Yeah, but we'll see how the next few weeks goes. But I'd imagine when we start next season, certainly no Salah. I'd be surprised if there was Slot, and I think we'll have more conversations about Virgil van Dijk moving forward as well.
Where does he go though? Where does Virgil van Dijk go? Where does Mo go? Because I think when you have it, JP Dellacamera one time said, "How much?" He's like, "It's a joke. We tease him all the time, legend." But he always said, like in his mind, he had a certain amount of money. That box had to be checked for him to get in his car, start his car, and then drive to work. And I just wonder, once you have these guys that play at the highest level possible, like what's that next step? For Kevin De Bruyne, it could have been Major League Soccer in Chicago. He ends up in Napoli. Where does either of these two guys go after you're playing at kind of that penultimate level of outside of maybe Barcelona and Real Madrid that we're always used to seeing players go to? Where do they go?
Well, I guess Mo Salah's going to want as much money as possible. And I think that's going to be the issue with Mo Salah moving forward, is that the Saudi have been trying to get him for a long, long time. I don't think he would take a subpar offer. So I think it's Saudi or bust for Mo Salah. And considering, if you're watching the last 6 months, there's no way he could play at the top level. Like, he's not a top Premier League player. He wouldn't take a move down the league. I don't think he'll be going to Paris Saint-Germain. He wouldn't get in their team in front of Kvaratskhelia or Barcola or the other guy. So no one could pay him the money he wants. So I think
What
it's
about
Saudi or bust
family?
for him.
What do you think about family?
What about family? Why
I,
would he want to go to Saudi? Like, I mean,
because
in the end, like maybe his kids love it living in England, but in the end, he's got 3 years, 4 years left in his career, and then there will be retirement, and then the family can live wherever they want. Right now is the only time left that Mo Salah's going to make serious money, and I just think he loves making as much money as possible. Like as much as this all like, oh, he loves Liverpool. If a bigger offer came in from any club after a few years, everyone goes. If a bigger offer came in from Real Madrid, if a bigger offer came in from Paris Saint-Germain when he was in his pomp, at the very least, he'd have leveraged that to get a better contract for himself. So, loyalty only goes so far when you're, an Egyptian in the UK trying to make as much money as possible. And I think he's loyal to a point, but he's also flirted with leaving multiple times to make as much money as possible. So I think he's Saudi or bust. Slot, I think it doesn't matter. I think they'll just, obviously, they'll find a home for him so they can bring Xabi Alonso in and pay him out. Van Dijk is the interesting one because there's still time left on his contract. I think that he still has such an influence over the club that he will likely remain and then look to find a replacement for Konate and those around him. I wonder whether a new manager might come in and let's say it is Xabi Alonso. I think the first thing he would do is look at Van Dijk and be a bit like, for the way we're going to play and what we want to do, and Xabi Alonso might want to go to a 3 at the back, I don't think there's much of a home left for Virgil van Dijk. And I think that, Dunny, is going to be a big conversation for us moving forward. The home for Van Dijk will be interesting because I think he still could do it at a lot of clubs across Europe. Certainly could play for everybody in Italy. Certainly could play for 1 or 2 other clubs in England if he wanted to. There's always a move back to Celtic if he wanted to do that. There's always a move to the Netherlands in the top of the Eredivisie if there's money, if he wants to do that. I think Van Dijk will be interesting, but I also think that might be quite ugly in the summer. A new manager might want to move him out.
Can you imagine? I mean, it's I always giggle to myself when people talk about loyalty. Loyalty is the present. It's not the future. Loyalty is remembering the past. But when you have managers come in, man, that's where the rubber hits the road and people start figuring out real quickly the idea of who they think they are and the value of what they've had versus the way someone else sees them. And I'll tell you what, having had that happen to myself, you will never have more of an ego blow, a death of ego, if you will, in those moments where you realize, man, I was wildly overestimating who I really was within the scope of what they were using me for. That's why I love when it's like hashtag till I die, or like you'll always be a member of the family. And I'm like, you, bro. Sorry, Tim. Like, you just whacked me.
Yeah.
Like,
pay me.
What are you talking about? So
going to be one to follow. That might get nasty across the summer. Listen, 2 other bits I wanted to get to on the show today. Let's go to the USA and talk about Inter Miami, who opened their brand new stadium, NU Stadium, this weekend in an entertaining 2-2 draw against Austin. Both Luis Suarez and Lionel Messi on the score sheet, which is apt, though didn't win the game. Give us your view on this. Of course, there's a historical context that we've discussed previously on this, but like the long journey to getting this stadium open as part of the wider Miami Freedom Park campus, which may end up costing billions to construct the whole thing.
Don't worry, they're going to make their money back, bro.
Yes,
don't fret.
I'm sure they'll be absolutely fine, but of course you've got to spend the money first and then bring it back after. So give us your view on this, on the football terms of things, but also the wider context of Inter Miami's embedding into culture inside South Florida.
Yeah, listen, for those that don't know, I was a part of Ray Hudson's Miami Future. And when we were getting to the very end of that, it was kind of, and my computer's going to die. No. Sorry, 1 second. Let me try.
So he's got to do this off the cuff now. He's got to do it off the cuff.
No, it was, I literally, I was like, I'm going to charge my phone and then I'm going to charge my computer. And then I realized I had to plug in.
It's not easy to multitask, is it? With 2 different plugs.
Shocker.
2 plugs is far too complicated.
It really is. It's these glasses. So I was a part of Ray Hudson's Miami Fusion and a group of players, teammates that will ever go down as legendary human beings. And was there when they contracted. And I can remember going up and Ray was like, Briny, it's your last time getting a paycheck here. And then we all kind of went our separate ways. So I was with actually some MLS figureheads when the announcement came. I can vividly remember I was in Arizona. I was doing this kind of like MLS media tour where I would go speak with kind of the young players coming into the league, talk about social media, talk about management of when you're stepping in front of the microphone, teaching them different things on camera, off camera, stand up when you're doing radio interviews because if you sit down, you lay down, it just sounds like all those little things.
Yeah.
So we're there and we're watching this, and David Beckham does the announcement, and it was kind of like his thing, and it was incredible to see understanding the power when David Beckham came to Major League Soccer. I don't think he gets enough credit because he single-handedly changed the trajectory of the way that this league was growing and put it on fast forward. And now in the midst of nuclear arms spending with the way that we're watching all this kind of transpire and the growth of the league, both on and off the field, it's been nothing short of extraordinary. But I think the moment that he brought in the Moss brothers as part of this ownership group, now all of a sudden, like the 3 different sites, the 4 different sites, the marina sites, all of these things that he couldn't, he was looked at as an outsider. All of a sudden, now you've got the insiders and the Moss brothers with the way that they were able to kind of throw their weight around, open up doors, navigate things, and get a hold of a property right next to the Miami airport that from a zoning perspective was so many different challenges: the park, the golf course, the testing, trying to figure out what's in the ground, the hiccups, all of those things, financing, building, and understanding that this is an anchor, but that anchor also coincides with a tremendous commercial valuation that, somewhere down the road is going to be gajillions of dollars. I watched the game. It looked extraordinary. Kudos to everybody involved. I mean, for all the whispers that we were hearing about the timeline and the pressure that they were under to get that open is incredible. I can't wait. Max and I, we've got the Messi and Miami game at Real Salt Lake on a Wednesday, and then we go directly to Miami. I think it's the 3rd game against New England Revolution, so I'll be down there in a couple weeks' time, and I can't wait to check it out. But yeah, I think the stadium visually matches what's been built on the field.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, it's not just a statement of intent, it's a statement of reality that both on and off the field, this is going to be the premier club that everyone else is everyone's going to try to match. They're not going to do it the same exact way. What LAFC has done is incredible. What Atlanta United has done is incredible. I think what we're going to see in Chicago when that stadium gets finalized is going to be extraordinary. NYCFC right around the corner as well. We got Boston, New England Revolution building. What we're seeing is really a huge transition. And I don't know if this is talked about enough, where it used to be from the early days of Major League Soccer, you get inside of the stadium. That's all that matters. And sometimes it's a shared stadium. Sometimes you're splitting your costs or you're even losing more than that. But now then you built your own stadium, and these stadiums were out in the perimeter of whatever cities that you found yourselves in. This new phase of MLS with expansion and the evolution of from an ownership group, you're talking about multi-billion-dollar owners being involved. For everyone that constantly either questions or discredits the growth of Major League Soccer, you're just factually wrong with the way that this is growing. It might not be growing the way you want it. It might not involve promotion relegation. But what we're seeing is owners figuring out ways to build stadiums downtown, and that's just a game changer. Having that walkable environment that really matches NFL, NHL, NBA, Major League Baseball, et cetera, et cetera. So what Miami is doing right now is incredible. The challenge isn't right now. The challenge is post Lionel Messi.
Yeah.
So how is individually Miami planning for this, and what is collectively Major League Soccer doing as well? Because I think the net spend was like plus 800% on incoming players, but the average of those incoming players were around 24, 25. So while we're talking about DePaul and Sonny and Luis Suarez and Lionel Messi, and rightfully so, Thomas Muller, all of these guys, it's still the growth of this league still is dependent upon the younger players and being very dynamic with the way that they're trying to build out what this league looks like. But I can't wait to get down there. It's extraordinary to see the turn of events, which was outlier now toward kind of insider, which will be this next 5 to 10 years.
The other bit on this was that, hopefully I'm going to be visiting Miami in the summer. And like when you go to new cities, you go to Madrid or whatever, you were in Barcelona, you occasionally mention it. One of the first things you do is you find who the football team is in that area, and then you go and visit the stadium. You do the stadium tour and things like that. And I think certainly this stadium is going to become part of that. When I come to Miami, I'll absolutely be going to the stadium for at the very least a tour and hopefully seeing a game or some sort of event there. But the other bit I wanted to ask you in terms of location is, like, one of the elements that US soccer doesn't have and can't have, because I don't know if you knew this, America is massive, is that there's no sort of away fan culture. To a degree, I know, but like you just can't.
Some teams,
because,
yeah.
but you just can't. If you have like a, Cincinnati, Columbus Crew, they're kind of near each other sort of thing, maybe you can do it. But in general, a lot of the fans are just too far away to make the travel. And of course, the cost of traveling in America is ludicrous. I'm not going to give an arm to go to see Columbus away. But like, what was interesting here, and Tim mentioned this to me earlier on the football show, and I wanted to put it to you, was like the fact it's by the airport and people were going to want to make this their destination game. Plus, you've got Lionel Messi currently playing in the Lionel Messi stand, forever. Like, how much do you think building stadiums near transport hubs, like you don't have trains in the same way sort of we do, but like, how much do you think it being by the airport could encourage an away fan culture, and how important could that be in the continued expansion of kind of MLS, in that you don't go to an away game and you have the home team crowd and that's it? Because the away fans, as you've experienced in Europe, it's a key component of creating the atmosphere.
Yeah, and watching LAFC, because Max and I primarily do a lot of the Western Conference, so we're kind of on the seaboard of Vancouver, Seattle, Portland, LA, San Diego. There are, San Diego travels well, especially when it's in state. LAFC travels well no matter what. Seattle used to travel extremely well as well. Like you have groups, but I mean, you're really talking about 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, max. Here's the thing. I think Miami in the short term becomes a destination, not just because of the city, but now because Lionel Messi is playing there. And I have plenty of friends. Like I have friends here in Salt Lake that refuse to pay for the amount of ticket that is going to cost for Real Salt Lake to host Inter Miami and Lionel Messi, and the jeopardy of Lionel Messi not traveling and or injured and or being rested because of the World Cup, that they'd rather go to Miami. Like I have friends that literally like, screw this. I'd rather pay for 5 tickets, go to Miami. We can spend a couple days down there. We can go see the game, and it's a destination city. It's the same way I convinced my wife to go to Barcelona so I could, very, very maliciously go watch Lionel Messi in Barcelona play at Camp Nou. And she could do whatever she wanted. If she wanted to come with me, it's great. But I still wanted to go see a game because we were going to be in Barcelona. And it was the first thing I did. Same to you. Like we restructured our 10-year anniversary. Okay, we'll go to Dublin for a couple of days, then we'll go to Barcelona because that coincides with Barcelona Sevilla, and we can watch that game. And so, yeah, that's the idea. But I agree with you. I think it's interesting now with the general awareness that comes along with Son Heung-min, that comes along with Thomas Muller, that comes along with Lionel Messi, the Apple deal itself, the broadcast and the social media, the TikToks and, the live streams and all of these things. How do you take advantage of that? How do you get butts in the seats? So they've got the eyeballs and they're proud of the amount of eyeballs. But I also think, right now, the Lionel Messi effect is also showing a tremendous bump in season ticket purchases and as well as fan sellouts, fan numbers. That's been a big celebratory part of what MLS has talked about. Now, is it inflated a little bit? Maybe because of the Messi effect. But yeah, I agree with you. That's the challenge. I don't know the answer, but I think they're doing everything they can to really expose from a commercial standpoint the opportunity to see Lionel Messi in person.
Dunny, one final quick question today, as it's breaking news a couple of hours before we recorded about the US men's national team. Just a word on Patrick Agyemang, who impressed us all during the most recent international break. I think he was pretty guaranteed to be in the squad.
Yeah,
goes back to Derby, and he's had a serious injury, and Derby County confirmed today that he will miss the World Cup out with a serious long-term injury. Just give us a quick reaction to that.
Yeah, it's there's no right words, man. And he's such a good kid. If you think about the path less traveled, it's Patrick Agyemang. When you think about adversity and you think about development and late development, and people forget that he was one of the kids during his college experience of trying to make it to the highest level and try to, periodically jump. That it was during COVID. And he was one of the kids where it was just, the college career was effectively being snatched away from him because of what was happening globally. And he still figured out a way to make those jumps, from obviously his size and his stature and his physical profile speak and what he's done since the move from Charlotte. And I remember there was this narrative trying to be created, and I don't know exactly who created it, but it was like, he's not ready. Going to Derby County, he's not ready. He's not ready yet. And it's like, I don't know, man. 12 goals certainly tells me that he was ready. So very similar to Daryl Dike. Really disappointed for Patrick Agyemang. I can't, and you know, we've seen it. We will continue to see it. It's the jeopardy. I was talking to Roberto Martinez about this, last week. The jeopardy of these international breaks are could be as horrific, and managers, knocking down the door saying, "Don't you dare play my players more than 60 minutes. We're in a title run. We're in a Champions League run." We knew when they were going back, the moment that they step on the field, a player was going to go down. There was going to be something that happened. So the good news is that at least Haji Wright has been in a good run of form. He probably was frustrated not being a part of this last group. And maybe scientifically, maybe we got to give credit in a weird way to Mauricio Pochettino and his coaching staff that they decided to try this Christian Pulisic formula at the very last second, now knowing what we do know with Agyemang not being there. Where Agyemang stood was going to be an impact substitute. He wasn't starting over Flo Balogun. By the way, what another great goal from Flo.
Chip, yeah.
Ricardo Pepi just wins PSV Eredivisie title, and he's in a good run of form. So it's not like Patrick was going to be the guy that was going to be significant minutes, but he was a player profile that, as a former central defender, I would not want to come up against in the last 20 minutes of a match, just because he looked different, he felt different. So Haji Wright immediately steps up. And becomes that much more interesting for a roster pick. I wonder what the cause and effect is of a Diego Luna. This could only strengthen after his goal at the weekend. It could strengthen his chances for being one of those, hybrid playmakers, especially knowing that Christian can play high, Weston can play high, Tim Weah can play high. I don't think it does anything for Josh Sargent, even though Josh Sargent scored this weekend and he's been looking, I think, really sharp at Toronto. Really, I think he's it's good to see him responding after the pressure for the salary and the number and the expectations. But yeah, going back to Patrick, it just sucks, man. I'm telling you, he is such a good kid.
Yeah.
He's genuinely one of those guys. He's got this Cheshire cat smile, always like he's just happy. Like when he's mad, you can tell he's mad, but he never you can't feel that type of energy when he's around the media and around the former players. It's devastating because it takes, well, it also, what I'm not sure people realize is these are, I was watching DeMarcus Beasley and watching Landon and Josie and Mo and all these guys, Kobe Jones and Tony will be a part of that. John Harkes, Tab Ramos, Eric Winalda, all these guys. There's these tournaments, especially this one. I mean, you think about Tony and you think about, Alexi and Marcelo Balboa, all those guys from the 94 team. They're generational reference points for people like myself that grew up adoring the U.S. men's national team. This World Cup is going to be, I think, just a generational moment for these guys, and I hope they realize it because it's not just real time; it'll be forever in their future. Yeah. That these guys are going to be looked at as the guys in 2026 that either did this or they did that. And at the end of the day, man, this summer is going to be, I think, career defining in a lot of ways for some of these kids. And I think Patrick Agyemang could have been one of those kids that would have had a career defining moment. And I just wonder, like the Aiden Morrises or the Sebastian Berhalters, how do those guys that are maybe the fringe guys could have had that opportunity to be global superstars in kind of this hybrid of a World Cup moment?
Sad news for Patrick Agyemang. We wish him well in his long-term recovery. Dunny, we are out of time for today's Week in the Tackle. Thank you very much, as ever, for your time, company, and hilarious glasses. That's Brian Dunny Dunseth over there. I'm Tom Rennie in cool glasses. Tim Horsey produced the programme. No glasses. Loser. We'll see you next week. Thanks, everyone.